committee of the whole meeting, where the watershed partners put on a presentation outlining the stormwater problem that's affecting the village and as well as many communities in this part of the country. We wanted to understand the challenges that are before us. So after that presentation, we sat down and the purpose of tonight's meeting is to look at how we can address the problem as a community. So I've asked Tim Landon to speak first and talk about some efforts that the village is planning in stormwater management planning and analysis. And then Keely Davidson Bennett from the Chagrin River Watershed Partners will talk about their proposal that we requested from them, talking about researching actions that can be taken for individual property owners and looking at ways to implement those successfully in the village. So I'd like to kind of turn it over to Tim, and he can talk about what we have in store for this year.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Where to start? I guess I've been studying drainage in Chagrin for literally 30 years, and we've made some progress. That's some things we've forgotten about, like the storm sewer up Bell Street into the Miller Plumbing property was in 1994 a $1.4 million project that the village at that time had at times money falling out of the sky. So the problem had been there for years, and all of a sudden there was an estate tax revenue, and Bob McKay said, okay, let's knock that one off the list. So we did. That's one big one. And several other areas like the roller rink watershed have been around. It's sometimes worse than others. Fortunately, we're protected on that one by Bainbridge Township. And turns out townships aren't very good at solving problems and that cost money. So they basically intercept all the stormwater that comes from above, and it runs down several streets and eventually puddles and goes away. Eventually, they're going to figure out how to solve the problem, and hopefully it's retention because that protects everybody and we could participate in that. So we had that discussion last year, but it caught us a little bit off guard when they made noises like they were going to solve that problem, which could put us at risk because none of our piping downstream is big enough to take that actual flow that is tributary to the watershed. So, I mean, that's raised some issues. The Willow Lane to Locust Lane has not gone away. People have come and gone, but still there's water coming down. One thing we did in planning ahead was when Falls Walk subdivision was built, they put in retention to solve, to mitigate the impact they would have, kind of keep the playing field level. But when they did that, the village retained an easement over that entire, the retention basin and the entire open area behind them. So that gave us an opportunity to help solve problems. So on this year's agenda is basically updating the master sewer plan in specific areas. So one big aspect of that behind the scenes is we rebuilt a model of the village storm sewer system. So this is a modern computerized model that takes the surface images plus the storm sewer system, the piping network. And it's something that can be actually balanced based on actual measured flow. So it's something we didn't have in the past. So that gives us the opportunity to look at that watershed and factor in a number of improvements, which we found to be effective in places. It might include enhanced retention in the pond, maybe enhanced storage within the wetlands and enhanced wetlands in the open wooded area north of Falls Walk, as well as some potential stream enhancements through Locust Lane, rain gardens and bioretention cells, which we found to be effective in Greenbrier. But it's without a model, it's hard to scientifically say we are solving the problem cost effectively. So the model included, we did a drone flight that will be able to do some, first of all, imagery, just, kind of a tour of the area. But it collected data of the surface features, which had obviously changed based on the topography available when the retention basin was built and Falls Walk was populated. So we had to update that, which was done and was very effective with the drone data collection. Instead of field survey, we were able to fly a drone over private property and collect that information. So that's on the agenda this year, as well as replacing the culvert at the downstream end, is to say, can we replace it in the same size and expect that we can make improvements further upstream, that culvert is adequately sized in the future. That doesn't solve the funding problem, but that would at least give us a very strong base to stand on when we go out to look for funding. We had discussions with Geauga County last year on potentially multiple retention basins, which is one option, as opposed to one large basin, which you can picture where the water collects, which is at the roller rink. So there is no single parcel available. There's no open parcel there at the most convenient place to do retention. So it could be a number of basins, which without a model, it's hard to predict how several basins would work together. So, I mean, if they're done wrong, they could potentially make things maybe not worse, but maybe not help themselves if it's not a well-balanced system. So that's on the agenda. So Locust Lane for sure is on the agenda for this year, as well as having a strong model to look at individual areas going forward. So while this is underway, I mentioned at the recent presentation that any of our old streets, water has found a way to disappear, over 100 years. The neighborhood gets settled and people figure out how to manage water or live with it. But take a drive down any side street in the village and you see additions constantly. We get at least one tear down rebuild a year, and that involves, typically a larger house, a new piping system, all which have impacts on the neighborhood. So that's one of the issues that, I would like to address through the code with, that council be aware and educated and be able to make decisions on how best to do that, to fairly assess the costs and the responsibility to the source of the potential problem. What I've been in the position way too many times of meeting with long-term residents looking at a new building or roof and someone asking, well, why did you allow this, or how can this happen, that kind of thing. So what I'd like to do is get ahead of that and with just smart planning be able to address those issues before they even arrive. So that's part of the idea of looking at potential legislation going forward, and that Watershed Partners have done a nice job of getting us some research, and we're still working on it. So with that, I'll move on to the next phase.
Tim, you might want to mention that Locust Lane watershed, fixing that drainage. That actually starts up on North Cleveland Street and involves Willow Lane and the rest. It isn't just the street Locust Lane, it's the whole watershed.
Yeah, it's that entire intersection area of Falls Road, North Cleveland Street, North Street, and even a significant portion, if driving out of town up North Street, you hit a high point, which is also, which is the end of the old sanitary sewer system. As you cross that high point, headed towards the Falls Road intersection, both the sanitary and storm sewer system change. So the storm sewer beyond that point is tributary to Locust Lane stream. So that stream probably looked a lot different in the mid 50s when Locust Lane was developed, and then the mid 60s when it became a public road, and not much has changed there. So what could have been a very small stream, now basically the stream is the entire road of Locust Lane, which I don't know how often, but there are times when it's impassable due to the high water. So
the water seems to accumulate on the north side of the road from the south side, and replacing the culvert. I know I've talked to a number of the neighbors and they're not so sure that's going to make a lot of difference. Is the culvert, where does the rain come that goes through the culvert?
Well, it comes from the wooded area behind us. It's like house number 80. So it's in the midsection where
Okay.
you can see the stream come through, and then it crosses a few driveways. But you know what happens when high water comes is
So
that
it
roadside swell
goes,
is not big enough.
right, so it goes behind the one house and then behind two houses and then goes to the house
Right.
that's on North Main.
Yeah,
Jan, and also a stream that comes down from Lindell Drive, which goes all the way up to East Summit Street. And you get that whole drainage area too. So you're funneling through a very small area, a drainage area that starts on Summit Street and goes all the way to North Street and Falls Road, North Cleveland. It's a huge drainage area that you're trying to get through
Right,
a small funnel.
right. It seems to be when we have hard rains, which we've had a number of them the last couple of years, it just pools on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
I mean, and what we did, you know, maybe 10 years ago, Tim, where we put in the big stones and the cement pieces, that helped. But it doesn't, it seems to be getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the rainfall's increasing, Jan, is what the problem is.
I see.
I have a question before we get into specific projects. Tim, you mentioned you've got a pretty good model of our community and surrounding area and the water that flows. This model, does it incorporate all the different slopes of the streets and the size of the collection system and all the impervious area that each one drains?
Yes, it combines them together, which is kind of a modern way of analyzing the watershed system.
That's
and then
fabulous.
what we can also do is we'll do some metering of flows along Locust, a place where we can measure depth of water and compare that to what the model would predict for a certain rainstorm. And compare that to the actual measured value and then balance the model that way.
Could you also predict an increased flow by impervious surface increases?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. All of the above.
That's a pretty powerful tool. Okay.
We provided for that cost in the budget.
What cost is that, Mayor?
The cost for modeling the whole village storm sewer.
Oh,
Yeah, that item will be listed in the capital improvement plan.
Okay.
All right, we ready for Keely?
Yeah, Tim, are you all done, Tim?
Yeah.
All right. Next, we want to move to Keely Davidson Bennett, who's the Senior Project Manager with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. We asked them to provide us with a proposal to study alternatives and options we can take, and she's here to present their proposal and what that work would entail.
Thank you for inviting me to present this proposal. Were we going to share the proposal on the screen? Yeah, okay, great. So again, I'm Keely Davidson Bennett, a senior project manager with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. If the village decides to hire us to assist you with this work, I would be the project manager for this project with assistance from CRWP's deputy director and executive director. I have 8 years of experience with Chagrin River Watershed Partners, including a lot of experience with helping communities update their comprehensive stormwater ordinances. And I also coordinated a research project in which I was the bridge between researchers and design engineers and communities. And that research project looked at the performance of bioretention and permeable pavement performance in Northern Ohio on poorly draining soils. My organization, Chagrin River Watershed Partners, has been around for 25 years, and we've been helping communities with flooding, erosion, and water quality problems all of that time. One of the ways that we help communities with these problems is by helping them to adopt and implement local regulations that protect their natural resources and solve problems. For this project, we are proposing to assist the village by compiling information about other regulations that other communities have adopted if we could scroll down, that would just, yeah, that would just show the text of specifically what we're proposing to do. We also propose to identify community-specific considerations for stormwater management that would affect individual lot stormwater management. So such site constraints as steep slopes and small lots, and the implications of those constraints on regulations. We would also assist the village with considering some other potential solutions other than a regulation, and if the village wanted to pursue the ordinance development, we would assist the village with developing draft language, and we would refine that language based on input from the community. At each stage of this project, we anticipate presenting our findings to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee and Village Council, and incorporating feedback from village staff, council, and the public that we receive as we produce the next iteration of material for the village to consider. We would also assist the village with producing trainings for landscapers and other contractors on how to implement stormwater management at the site scale, specifically for residential properties. We envision that that would involve a recording that could be shared through the village's website or the YouTube channel. And as you can see in the table, we estimate our fees for this project to the village would be $6,000 to $8,000. We would be subsidizing that work with a value of $2,000 of revenue secured from grants and service agreements from stormwater utilities. Does anybody have any questions about this proposal?
Do you also help us with applying for grants?
We do. That is not in the scope of this service agreement, but that is something that we have done for our members and will continue to do for
Okay.
Chagrin Falls.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Jim, Darren, do you have any questions?
Not really. I mean, I have the kind of obvious one about the billing that you know, how close is an estimate. But Keely, I'm assuming that's probably, you know, a pretty close number. You wouldn't have it down for us. No, I mean, it sounds like this is a project that needs attention. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. And I don't think it's going away on its own. That's for sure.
Rob, do we need to have a motion to say, yes, we want to pursue this, or do you want to wait and put it on the agenda of council?
I don't think you need a motion. It's within our spending authority, Chan. I just wanted to make sure everybody was on board before we charged off and did something. And that's why we brought it to the committee, to get everybody aware of what we were planning to do here.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mayor. I think that's great.
Yep. I can't remember, Mayor, is this in the budget? I don't remember seeing this line item in there.
This item is not specifically in the budget. This proposal came up after the budget was formulated, but we do have sufficient funds to cover it within.
I know there's some miscellaneous in there, and this is not a huge project. Okay, thanks.
So this would be contractual services under.
It would either be operating contractual services, or we may be able to group it under the overall stormwater management planning that we have in the capital.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Could you kind of give me the 30,000 foot view of how you see this all working? I mean, obviously there's a lot of little pieces in this as far as looking at what we can do from a zoning and building permit point of view. And then also the infrastructure part of that.
So I see what Tim spoke of is looking at the big picture stormwater actions we want to study and look at solutions, and then how to fund them on the big picture side of things. And then with the work that Watershed Partners would do, that I'm envisioning that coming up to a series of recommendations for things that we can require of property owners, including the village as property owner when we develop property, and looking at best practices to implement and require to reduce the stormwater flows into our stormwater system. We want to do this in a step where each step of this process, the information is reviewed by the committee and making sure that it's a right fit for our residents.
Basically, Tim wants some guideposts, Jim, because the code gives him pretty much carte blanche discretion. And we've been just getting hit with one request after another for people that want to put in yard drains and bigger pipes out to the storm sewers. And what we're all scared to death of is we let that go ahead, it's going to overwhelm the storm sewer system. And we're going to be refaced with replacing those pipes along with the water line and the sewer lines, which we just cannot do, and financially. And so we're thinking that we need some guideposts and guidelines about requiring some on-site retention before and some limiting inflows to this stormwater. There was one request on Maple Street that Tim had the homeowner put in what amounts to a cistern and a pump that would regulate the amount of water that can hit the storm sewer at any one time, because it just won't take the load.
And then on top of that, do you foresee any stormwater projects in the capital fund?
We don't have any. This year was a planning year, Jim. You know, we got to get a model of this. We got to see what other communities are doing. I know Keely had mentioned to me, Pittsburgh had done some things and they're not in a dissimilar situation to us geographically. A lot of hills is what I meant by that. So I thought that in 21, we'd largely be planning, modeling, and studying. And in 22 and thereon, we would tackle the actual construction. The first step was replacing that culvert under Locust Lane. And Jan, that culvert is in a deteriorating condition.
Yes, I'm aware.
Yeah, and it is a little bigger than what we're planning to replace it with is a little bigger. So it's kind of a two-for reason why we're doing it. We don't think it's going to 100% solve a problem. We do think that lady that lives at the corner of North and Locust Lane, we do think that'll keep her backyard from flooding. You know, we've gone up there and done a lot of work for her, and the feedback I've gotten is it's helped a lot. I think, Rob, am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We've redefined the channel as it enters the culvert area and try to reduce the amount of turbulence and backflow in that. Try to keep the water channel better and less from spreading up into our property.
Yeah, that's been a problem there for a long time.
Absolutely. Back in the 90s, that was a problem. One owner, it had a walkout basement, and one owner bricked up the sliding glass door to stop the problem. So we're aware.
Well, I had 3 sanitary sewer backups in 1 year. So I'm well aware of the water problems we've got here.
Yeah.
So are there any other questions?
Hey, Bill, I'm wondering if the committee should take a vote to support moving forward with this contract, just since you have 2 roles here, and I want to make sure you're covered from a conflict of interest standpoint.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's why we're here. I wanted everybody input, because this is one thing that there's no magic wand that can be raised or waived. It's going to require a lot of thought and a lot of input.
Agree. I mean, for what it's worth, I think this is going to give us a nice balance of options for the municipality and for residents to help solve some of these problems, and as well as giving Tim some, some firm guideposts, if you will, for helping walk homeowners through, dealing with this water mitigation issue. So I think it's a good proposal.
Absolutely fine.
Darren or Jim, would you like to make the motion?
I'll make a stab at it. I'd like to make a motion that we continue with the step of this proposal and encourage the mayor and council to address any formal contract that comes from the watershed partners and make everybody aware that we are starting out a program to not only monitor stormwater, but try to correct some of the issues we have.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried, and we will continue these meetings. And I will recommend to council that we go ahead and pursue this, and everybody knows that that's here. And I appreciate all your attendance, both Jim Newell and Darren Wyville from council, and Aaron and the mayor. Thank you for putting this together, and Rob and Tim as well.
Okay.
And Katie, thank you
Have
for helping.
everybody.
All right, so we reconvene in about 10 minutes, I guess.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thank you.